Welcome to the Joseph H. Jackson Exposes Joseph Smith video. Joseph H. Jackson was an associate of Joseph Smith, and he wrote a pamphlet about his experiences with Joseph Smith. It's entitled A Narrative of the Adventures and Experience of Joseph H. Jackson in Nauvoo. Came out in 1844. That was the title initially. He changed the title a couple years later for the second edition. All right, the Apostle Brigham Young made a comment about Joseph H. Jackson in 1844, and we'll get more into who Joseph H. Jackson was throughout the video. We really don't know a whole lot about his life before he came to Nauvoo, Illinois, and became an associate of Joseph Smith. But anyway, the Apostle Brigham Young made the following comment about Jackson in the Times and Seasons in October of 1844. He says, Joseph H. Jackson says that he has published all of Joseph's secrets. That's Joseph Smith. He says he has published all of Joseph's secrets, but nobody believes his tales because he lies. That's what Brigham Young says. Nobody believes Joseph H. Jackson's tales because Jackson is a liar. And that really is, that's probably the number one issue in this video. Is what Jackson said in his pamphlet true, or did he lie, or is it a mixture of truth and lies? So that is an important question to ask. All right, a statement here by William and Wilson Law et al. They were the writers of the Nauvoo Expositor, which came out in June 7, 1844, and we have a statement out of the Nauvoo Expositor regarding Joseph H. Jackson. Now, William Law was a member of the First Presidency in these early days of the church, one of the authors of the Nauvoo Expositor. He became an apostate and became an enemy to Joseph Smith. But William Law says that Joseph H. Jackson was a reliable witness. This is what he says. The Warsaw Signal, a newspaper, contains a lengthy letter from Joseph H. Jackson. We have reason to believe from our own observation that the statements that he, Jackson, makes are true. So that's the opinion of William Law. He is pictured above. All right, a statement here by Joseph Johnston. He is the biographer-to-be of Joseph H. Jackson. His biography has not come out. He's been working on it for years and years. Not sure if he's still working on it. This statement was made in 2013. And he was talking to the Mormon historian Kathleen Melanakos. And Joseph Johnston says that almost everything in Jackson's pamphlet turns out to be factual. So this guy's probably done more research on Joseph H. Jackson than anybody, and he says almost everything in the pamphlet turns out to be factual. So when we go over some of the information in the pamphlet, I'll probably know enough about Mormon history to say, well, yeah, this is factual, this isn't, or this is something that we don't know yet. So yeah, Joseph Johnson, telephone interview with Kathleen Melanakos in 2013. His biography has not been released yet as of July 2020. All right, a statement by Will Bagley. He's pictured above. Probably one of the best Mormon historians on the face of the planet, in my opinion. He wrote a paper. It's called Assassination, Robbery, and Seduction. It's unpublished. I was not able to find it online. Written in 2014, Bagley says about Joseph H. Jackson the following. He says, recent scholarship has verified many of Joseph Jackson's most extravagant claims, and many of its outrageous incidents that once sounded fantastic are now confirmed. So according to Bagley, this is in 2014, about 6 years ago, recent scholarship has verified many of Joseph H. Jackson's most extravagant claims. So that's a pretty good authority in my mind. All right, so other Mormon historians that feel like Jackson's pamphlet is valuable, a valuable, reliable resource. Another historian is Kathleen K. Melanakos. She's pictured above. She uses Jackson's pamphlet extensively in her book, Secret Combinations, Secret Combinations, Evidence of Early Mormon Counterfeiting, which came out in 2016 and is an excellent book. All right, another PhD Mormon historian, Christopher Smith, seems to believe that there are important facts to be gleaned in Jackson's pamphlet as well. This is just stuff I've heard him talk about on podcasts. The Naked Mormonism podcast about Joseph H. Jackson said that they used Christopher Smith's material and history in that. So I think that he believes there are important facts to be gleaned in the pamphlet. Not sure if he feels like it's 100% reliable, but. And the Mormon historian Grant Palmer has used Joseph H. Jackson's pamphlet as a source in his writings. He has some pretty lengthy quotes from Jackson in his book entitled Restoring Christ. He wrote an article about William Law where he quotes Joseph H. Jackson as well. Yeah, Palmer, great historian, also using Jackson. All right, Mormon historian Dan Vogel is conspicuously silent on Jackson in all of his books. Doesn't use any of his material in his early Mormon document series. Nothing in his book on Joseph Smith, nothing in his other books that I can tell. I'll take this to mean that Jackson, he doesn't think Jackson is a reliable source. Otherwise, he would have used him in some of these works. So Dan Vogel, kind of a contrarian opinion to these other guys. And of course, like a lot of subjects in Mormon history, I have yet to find one true believing Mormon historian that treats Jackson's pamphlet as reliable. They pretty much universally slam it, don't use it, don't like it, and that is because there is so many bombshells in this pamphlet that we're going to go over in this video. We're going to get into this pamphlet pretty deep. It's about a 35-page pamphlet. As far as I can tell, not one true believing Mormon historian uses the pamphlet for any of their history. All right, so let's get into the pamphlet here. A narrative of the adventures and experience of Joseph H. Jackson, 1844. This statement is regarding his first visit to Nauvoo, Illinois, the city of the Mormons. He first came to town in October of 1842, but he only stayed for a while, and we'll get into that on this slide and the next slide. But he says, my visit to the city of Nauvoo at that time, being a stranger, induced the people to believe that I was a spy from Missouri in quest of evidence against Smith. Many men who I have since learned belonged to the day-night band visited me at my boarding house and asked all manner of questions in relation to my business in the city. All right, so we had these Mormons asking him all kinds of questions. Well, it turns out they really didn't trust him, according to Jackson, because this is what he said in a letter to the editor to the Warsaw Signal, June 5th, 1844. This is what he said happened. A stranger fired a pistol. The ball whizzed by my head, and the assassin fled. I saw plainly from what I had heard that Joe Smith was the instigator of the villain who attempted to take my life without provocation. So you can see why he was scared off this first time, if this story is true from what Jackson is saying. All right, so Harold Schindler gives us a little bit of information about Joseph H. Jackson in his book, Orrin Porter Rockwell, Man of God, Son of Thunder, came out in 1966. Pretty entertaining book. Schindler says about Jackson, a tall, refined-looking man had ridden into Nauvoo and quietly taken lodgings. Once settled, he had asked for and received, after being relieved of his weapons, an introduction to Joseph Smith. So once settled, he had asked for and received an introduction to Joseph Smith. All right, a statement from the historian Thomas Gregg, The Prophet of Palmyra book, 1890. Mr. Joseph H. Jackson was an adventurer of fine appearance and gentlemanly manners, who appeared in the country during the Troubles. Jackson went to Nauvoo and became quite intimate with Joseph Smith and the leaders. And we have some information that Joseph Smith actually gave Jackson a job. One of the footnotes in the Joseph Smith papers, I couldn't get an accurate reference for this, but I read it in there in the Joseph Smith papers online. It says, in May of 1843, Joseph Smith hired Joseph H. Jackson as a clerk for his land transaction. So kind of working as a clerk slash real estate agent. All right, Joseph Smith gave a statement about Jackson in his History of the Church. He says, on May 20, 1843, Mr. Joseph H. Jackson, representing himself as being out of employment, unemployed, and destitute of funds, he desired that I would employ him and relieve his necessities. I took compassion and employed him as a clerk to sell lands, so as to give him a chance in the world. So I guess Jackson was working as a clerk, kind of a real estate agent for Joseph Smith and all the properties that they were buying and selling in Nauvoo. All right, William Clayton in his diary also talks about Jackson. This can be found in Clayton's Secret Writings Uncovered, extracts from the diaries of William Clayton. We do have some of the extracts. We don't have the whole thing. Probably about half of William Clayton's Nauvoo diaries have not been released by the church, but these parts that the Tanners published, we do have Clayton's Secret Writings. So it says, May 20th, 1843, rode on the prairie with President Joseph Smith, Joseph H. Jackson, Brother Oakley, and others to look at lands. So this is William Clayton talking. In the nighttime, we rode out with Jackson to show him some lands. All right, more from William Clayton's diaries. President Joseph Smith tells me that he has appointed Joseph Jackson to sell lands and relieve me of their burden. So it sounds like William Clayton was the one selling the lands, and now Joseph H. Jackson was going to take over for Clayton. Joseph Smith says that Joseph Jackson appears a fine and noble fellow, but is reduced in circumstances. So I guess Joseph Smith thought that he was poor. All right, so the same source here, Clayton's Secret Writings Uncovered by the Tanners. This can also be found in a book by Signature Books entitled An Intimate Chronicle, The Journals of William Clayton. It has all this stuff in it as well, plus more of his journals. However, it doesn't have everything. Like I said, the Nauvoo journals, probably only about half of it have been released. There's different estimates about how much have not been released. It's a very important document for history, and of course, the Mormon Church refuses to release it. Anyway, Clayton also says that President Joseph Smith feels disposed to employ him, that's Joseph H. Jackson, and Jackson says that he shall be baptized before long, which he never did. All right, a statement by Joseph Smith in his diary. This one came out of an American Prophet's Record, the diaries and journals of Joseph Smith. All of his diaries are now available at the josephsmithpapers.org, which you can go and search through online for free now. That is a nice service that the church has done for historians. So on this date in Joseph Smith's diary, January 5th, 1844, he says, Brother Phelps made out a commission for Joseph H. Jackson and Mariner J. Eaton as my aides as Lieutenant General. So a commission, I guess he's paying Joseph H. Jackson, and he was also made one of his aides as Lieutenant general. So that's something interesting too. Not only was he working as a clerk, but he was an aide as lieutenant general. All right, another statement in Joseph Smith's diary. He says, in 1844 at 3 p.m., I related to Dr. Bernheisel and Joseph H. Jackson my commencement in receiving revelation. Mr. Jackson said that he was almost persuaded to be one with me. Not sure what he meant by that, to be one with me, maybe to join the church. Joseph Smith replied that I would to God that he were not only almost, but altogether to be one with Joseph Smith. So, sound like, they were somewhat close. And one theory about Joseph H. Jackson is that he may have been a bounty hunter. When he came to Nauvoo in 1842, I guess that was the first time, there was a price on the head of Joseph Smith. There was two different bounties, one for 300 and one for 200 for the head of Joseph Smith, or to bring him to justice. And there was also a price on Orrin Porter Rockwell's head for $600 and $200. Two different bounties for Porter Rockwell as well. So that's one possibility, and this is talked about in the Painesville Telegraph in 1842. All right, some interesting information in Melanakos' book here, Secret Combinations. Joseph Jackson stated under oath that he had negotiated with Hancock County Sheriff Harmon T. Wilson to help bring Joseph Smith to justice before he ever went to Nauvoo. And I believe in the pamphlet there is an affidavit from Harmon T. Wilson stating that that is the case. Their prior agreement is similar to what we would call a sting operation in today's terms. So kind of a double agent going undercover to see what information he can get about the prophet. Pictured above, I guess we have an undercover officer as long as he hides his badge. All right, some more information from Melanakos. She's pictured above. This is a picture of her when she went on the Mormon Stories podcast. She says, Joseph Jackson lived on close terms with the Smiths for nearly a year, from May 20, 1843 to March 24, 1844. And he came in 1842 for a short time as well. All right, same source here, Melanakos. Her book is pictured above. She says Joseph Smith made Jackson his personal aide de camp on January 5th, 1844. Well, what is an aide de camp? Well, if you look it up on Google, it says that it is a military officer acting as a confidential assistant to a senior officer. Joseph Smith being the senior officer. So, a confidential assistant, a military officer. All right. The historian D. Michael Quinn also says the same thing in his book, Origins of Power. He says, Joseph Smith trusted Joseph H. Jackson enough to make him an aide de camp in January of 1844, but he did not trust him enough to admit him to the Council of the 50 in the spring. Well, I have some conflicting data on that we're going to get to on another slide. Maybe some data that Quinn has not seen. So we'll go over that on another slide. All right, so D. Michael Quinn also talks about some censorship in the history of the church. Volume 6, page 438. He says, the history of the church deletes the appointment of Joseph H. Jackson and Marinus G. Eaton as Smith's aides de camp. So it deletes that out, it takes that out, censors it. What were they trying to hide in the history of the church? Maybe they were trying to hide the fact that Joseph H. Jackson and Joseph Smith were close. Trying to hide the fact that Jackson was an aide de camp to Joseph Smith being the lieutenant general. So deleting that out, I found that to be interesting. All right, so Joseph H. Jackson and Marinus G. Eaton probably knew each other pretty well. And Eaton was admitted to the Council of 50 on April 11, 1844. he was one of 3 men admitted to the council by Joseph Smith who were non-members. And of course, Joseph H. Jackson was also a non-member, and they were both aide-de-camps. So that's an interesting connection there. And Eaton was a member of the Council of 50. Quinn is saying that Jackson wasn't, but we're going to give some more information on that in a bit. Quinn is a pretty good historian on the Council of the 50, and he's made records of who is a member and who is not. But I don't think any list is comprehensive, and so I'll present my data here in a minute. Marinus G. Eaton was also involved in counterfeiting. There's a lot of speculation that Jackson was also a counterfeiter. So these two probably knew each other pretty well. All right, so here's the information that I found, and this may be the most important slide in this video. It's in John D. Lee's diaries, entitled Mormonism Unveiled, which came out in 1877. John D. Lee says that in the winter of 1843, which is in the right time frame for Joseph H. Jackson to be there, Joseph Smith organized the Council of 50, so the time frame fits. John D. Lee, Mormon bishop and Council of 50 member, said that a man by the name of Jackson belonged to the Council of 50, though he did not belong to the church. So that the data fits there. The name, he doesn't give the first name. That's how we don't know for sure. But he gives the name of Jackson, and he says that he was not a member of the church. And that data also fits. And John D. Lee, being a member of the Council of 50, he would know who was in the meetings. So the reason this is so important is because the Council of 50 is one of those secret committees, secret meetings that Joseph Smith had, where he spilled a lot of inside information that Jackson seems to know about. And another interesting tidbit on the Council of 50, I looked at the lists that are available online of all the members of the Council of 50. There is no other Jackson on the list. So whoever John D. Lee was talking about, it's a Jackson that hasn't made it onto the list yet. So it might have been Joseph H. Jackson. And so that means Joseph H. Jackson would have had inside information, about what was going on with Joseph Smith. And it's also interesting to note, I found another source here in a tangled skein. Is that how you say that? Skein, a tangled skein. Leslie S. Klinger, editor, 2008, says that Joseph Smith appointed Joseph H. Jackson to the super secret Council of 50. Jackson served as an adjutant, which was an administrative assistant to a senior officer in the Prophet's private army, the Nauvoo Legion. So there's another source. This one, I don't think it's as good as John D. Lee, but here's another source saying that Joseph H. Jackson was in the super secret group, the Council of 50. All right, so let's get to Joseph H. Jackson's own accounts here. Some of this is going to come from the letter to the editor in the Warsaw Signal. This one is June 5th, 1844. Some of it is going to come from a narrative of the adventures and experience of Joseph H. Jackson, also in 1844, the first edition. So he says, I, Joseph Jackson, would go to Nauvoo, insinuate myself into his, Joseph Smith's, favor, win his affection and confidence, and that if he really was a villain, I would find it out. And he says something similar in his narrative. He says, my motives in going to Nauvoo were to gain the confidence of the prophet Joseph Smith, that I might discover and disclose to the world his real designs and the nature of his operations. And he continues here, I represented myself as an outlaw and a fugitive from justice, ready to do whatever he, Joseph Smith, commanded. I, Jackson, was obliged to appease to him, Smith, as an abandoned wretch and an outcast, when I told him that I was a fugitive from justice and had committed the darkest crimes. It seemed to give him the greatest confidence. All right, so he continues in the Warsaw Signal. By degrees, I, Jackson, entwined myself completely into Joseph Smith's confidence. I seemed ready to perform whatever I was commanded, and to the world kept up the appearance that I was in reality what I seemed to be. So he's the double agent here. He's kind of working for the Sheriff Wilson. Sting operation, double agent, a con artist. So it was probably pretty hard to fool Joseph Smith. It's hard to con a con artist. But gullibility is the con artist's best friend. All right, Jackson continues. I succeeded in my object. Every plot, every plan, every secret movement of the villainous system by which Joe deludes and strips his followers was made known to me. He talks about Joe deceiving and deluding the Mormons, stripping them of his followers, I guess taking their money, law of consecration, united order kind of stuff, stripping them and giving all your money to the church. Let Joseph Smith divvy it out as he sees fit. Other words for deluding, deceiving, misleading, hoodwink, fool, dupe, trick, beguile, cheat, or con. So got two con artists here, Joseph Smith and Jackson. All right, Jackson continues. I was admitted into all of Joseph Smith's secret council. So was that the Council of 50? Maybe. I think there is some evidence for that. So and Jackson says that he was. I was admitted to all of his secret counsel and was confided in so far that he disclosed to me every act of his life that he had occasion to refer to in conversation. And he says that Joseph Smith had complete control over the minds of the honest portion of his followers. So mind control, and that still goes on to this day. We got mind control going on in the Mormon Church in 2020. All right, Jackson continues in his narrative. There were hundreds of men in Nauvoo who, had Joe Smith commanded them to commit murder, they would have believed that they were doing God's service in obeying him. So doing whatever Joe Smith commands. We have the example of Mountain Meadows, where probably Brigham Young commanded those Mormons down in southern Utah to kill 125 men, women, and children. And Jackson points this out. The same thing with Joe Smith. If he would have commanded it, the saints would have done it. All right, Jackson continues. In Joseph Smith's secret councils, I wish he would have used the language Council of 50. But anyway, in Joseph Smith's secret councils, if he desired the assassination of his enemy, it was the will of the Lord that the persecutors of the church should be put out of the way, in other words, killed. Joseph Smith concocted the vilest plans for murder. Thus, assassination, robbery, and seduction were carried on. All right, Jackson continues. I became possessed of facts in relation to the plundering, the murdering, and the counterfeiting operations in which Joe has been for years engaged, and in which he is aided by accomplices throughout the country. Well, read Melanakos' book. That corroborates the counterfeiting operations. We have other corroborating evidence that he sent Orrin Porter Rockwell to kill Governor Boggs. That's a murder. I can't think of any plundering. There is some evidence for stealing horses and stuff like that as well. And Jackson talks about this in his narrative. I guess this is the plundering part. Avery was one of the gang of the Mormons who were horse thieves that infest the whole country. This far-famed holy city of Nauvoo has been the hiding place of more stolen goods, horses, and thieves than any other spot on earth. All right, so here Jackson tells us about this Captain Dunham and a man named Richardson. I'm not going to give the full context for this. I encourage people to go and read the pamphlet for themselves. A narrative of the adventures and experience of Joseph H. Jackson. To get the full context for this, I'm just pointing out the fact here that they threatened to kill him. So it says, Captain Dunham, under the orders of Joseph Smith, replied that they were to take Richardson and bring him to Dunham if they could do it alive, if not, kill him and bury him in a dark ravine. So more signs that the Mormons were committing murders. All right, the account continues here by Jackson. Had the nefarious plot succeeded as to have got Richardson to Nauvoo, the order of Joe Smith was to tie an iron bar to his shoulders and throw him into the Mississippi for catfish food. So throw him in, kill him, throw him into the Mississippi River, let the catfish eat him, and there's some pretty large catfish. Not sure how big they get in the Mississippi. But here is pictured a giant catfish above. All right, another one that Joseph Smith wanted to have killed was General Donathan. So Jackson says, Joe Smith wished me to go to Missouri by water, but wanted me to pledge myself to kill General Donathan. I feigned sickness, and by this means escaped further importunity. So he had to come up with excuses, for not going through with all these things that Joseph Smith wanted him to do, people that he wanted him to kill. All right, a statement here again by historian Thomas Gregg in The Prophet of Palmyra, 1890. Jackson said that Joseph Smith was guilty of murder and conspiracy, of counterfeiting, debauchery, spiritual wifery or polygamy, etc. And of course, the Book of Mormon is full of conspiracy theories and secret combinations as well. And Jackson says that Joseph Smith took me to houses where he kept his spiritual wives and introduced me to them all. Well, he probably wasn't introduced to all of them because Joseph had like 35, but maybe some of them. All right, a little bit of information about polygamy by Jackson. He says the doctrine of spiritual wives is kept a profound secret. It is kept a profound secret from the people at large, and is only permitted to be known to those to whom it is given to know the fullness of the kingdom. In other words, those who aid in carrying his secret measures. So those kind of like his inner circle, those who have stated blood oaths that they are on Joseph Smith's side. Those are the ones who know about it. But the people at large, polygamy and the spiritual wife system was kept a secret. That is true. All right, so he continues here. When, as happened in the cases of Miss Martha Brotherton and Miss Nancy Rigdon, Joseph Smith's overtures were rejected with disdain and exposure threatened, he would set 100 hellhounds on them to destroy their reputation. So those potential wives that rebuffed him, Joseph would set 100 hellhounds on them to destroy their reputations. That's also true. That's also corroborated by other sources. Joseph Smith would do smear campaigns against them, call them sluts and whores, etc. All right, so he continues here. The extent to which this abomination of spiritual wifery was carried may be imagined from the fact that Joe Smith boasted to me that he in this manner had seduced 400 women. Kind of bragging to Jackson here that Joseph Smith had sex with or seduced 400 women, kind of like a Wilt Chamberlain type figure. All right, so here's some information about William Law and Emma Smith. This is some of the information that Grant Palmer uses in his papers and books. It says Joseph Smith said that Emma Smith wanted William Law for a spiritual husband, and that she urged as a reason that as he, Joseph, had so many spiritual wives, she thought it but fair that she should at least have one man spiritually sealed up to her, and that she wanted William Law because he was such a sweet little man. So, Joseph, if you can have your wives, I want at least one additional husband as well, and I want William Law. So that's a pretty interesting story. Of course, Emma Smith is pictured above here. All right, and Jackson says that Joseph Smith even used his spiritual wives to poison and kill people. So you can see what a bombshell this pamphlet is. If this stuff is true in here, these are really some huge bombshells, and that's why no Mormon historian wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But anyway, Joseph Smith had only to tell certain of his spiritual wives that such a man had been in the Missouri War and that he should be put out of the way, in other words, killed, and his property and money consecrated to the use of the church. Then said Joseph Smith, it is damned easy for them, that's his spiritual wives, to get into his good graces, the person that they want to kill, and to mix a white powder with his food and put him out of the way or have him killed. All right, some more information from Jackson in his letter to the editor of the Warsaw Signal, June 5th, 1844. This information doesn't show up in the pamphlet, but it's pretty important information. He says, Joseph Smith acknowledged to me his proper character and principles. He admitted himself as an atheist, that's pretty interesting, and the Book of Mormon a humbug or a fraud. He's admitting that the Book of Mormon is a fraud. That's killer information right there. If that's true, that's pretty amazing. He admitted to Jackson the Book of Mormon was a fraud, and that the original of the Book of Mormon was written by a Lyman Spalding. There is a Lyman Spalding, but he may have meant Solomon Spalding. I think Lyman Spalding is a member, or is somehow related to Solomon Spalding, but the big theory is that Solomon Spalding wrote the initial draft of the Book of Mormon, and then Sidney Rigdon got a hold of that and worked on it. Sidney Rigdon worked on it himself, and then they used Joseph Smith as the prophet, seer, and revelator to kind of deliver it to the public. Joe Smith disclosed to me while in his confidence that he did send Orrin Porter Rockwell to Missouri to assassinate Governor Boggs. And that's corroborated in other sources as well. O.P. Rockwell, pictured above. This is probably more in his earlier days. And Jackson continues, after Rockwell had returned, Joe Smith offered me $3,000 if I would do what Rockwell had failed to do, to wit, to take the life of Governor Boggs. So Rockwell shot at him. I think he just injured him, didn't kill him. And so Joe Smith wanted Jackson to go and finish the job of taking the life of Governor Boggs for $3,000, which is quite a bit of money back in those days. Of course, Lilburn Boggs is pictured above here. All right, some information from George Rockwell in a letter to his father, August 3rd, 1844, probably related to O.P. Rockwell. This information is found in a book by Hallwas and Lanius, Cultures in Conflict. They say Joseph H. Jackson and Dr. Foster were severally applied to in the name of the Lord to fulfill that revelation of killing Governor Boggs, and money offered them to assassinate Governor Boggs. The revelation was publicly made by Joe Smith at one of the large meetings. So that's interesting. From a different source, George Rockwell saying the same thing that Jackson was saying. And of course, the expedition to kill Governor Boggs was kept a profound secret, and the Mormons were good at keeping secret oaths, and they even had certain punishments for people who did not keep their oaths. And Joseph Smith had singularly unmeaning countenance that was no index of his real character. He had so long practiced duplicity, in other words, lying, that there was scarcely a compunctious feeling left in his bosom, and he had no scruples in regard to the means that he should employ. So, Joseph Smith, long practicing duplicity. Of course, we have a picture here of duplicity, the black and the white. All right, Jackson continues. Emma Smith, Joseph Smith's wife, is acquainted with all of the villainous plans and operations of Joe, yet she should be looked on with pity rather than scorn. I believe that she, Emma Smith, knew no guile until Joe schooled her to wink at his rascality and compelled her by threats to aid in carrying out his measures. So, compelling Emma Smith by threats, and we have corroboration of this as well in other sources, and even in Doctrine and Covenants section 132, there are threats against Emma if she doesn't go along with polygamy. So again, Jackson's information is corroborated here. Of course, Emma Smith pictured above. All right, Jackson continues. Indeed, Joseph Smith has frequently said that it was with the greatest difficulty that he could prevail on Emma. In other words, winning arguments with Emma or convincing Emma to do things. It happened with great difficulty. In many cases, to hold her peace and not expose him to the world. So that's probably why the threats came. Threatening to kill Emma, and I did a whole video on that. To hold her peace and to not expose him to the world. Joseph Smith could not have that happen. All right. Joseph Smith attempted to hire myself, Jackson, and others to take the life of some of our most valuable citizens. So not just Boggs. Joseph Smith wanted to hire Jackson to kill other people as well. I will say from what I know that Joseph Smith's enemies are not safe. So yeah, Joseph Smith went after Governor Boggs. He had the Danites. They went after other people as well. And Jackson knew about this, that Joseph Smith's enemies were not safe. And Jackson continues, the fact that Joe Smith is engaged in counterfeiting also came to my knowledge while in his confidence. So, and there's a lot of other sources as well about Joseph Smith's counterfeiting. The best book on this is Kathleen Milanakos's. Joseph Smith pressed me, Jackson, to stay and enter into the manufacture of bogus, which is counterfeiting, coins and paper money, to which I consented, hoping to be able to get a clue to another branch of his villainy. Kind of going along with the program, there is some evidence that Jackson was familiar with counterfeiting before he came to Nauvoo as well. Shortly after this, Joseph Smith sent $200 to St. Louis for a German plate. I guess that's what they needed to make counterfeit money, and went to work in a remote part of the town to fit up for operation in counterfeiting. So interesting stuff. The first attempts at making bogus were rather rough, but Joe Smith obtained a splendid press and all the necessary tools and materials for his operation. The business was then rushed ahead in good earnest, and an excellent specimen of base coin was produced. Soon the city was flooded with this money, and a report was put in circulation that bogus manufacturers were at work in the city, in other words, counterfeiting. The press continued to run until they had manufactured about $350,000 which is a ton of money for those days. All right, so here is some very interesting information. All of the 12 apostles, except for Orson Pratt and Heber C. Kimball, all of them were engaged in this business of bogus making, except for those two, Orson Pratt and Heber C. Kimball, and frequently visited the room where the press was, and all of the 12, except for those two, took turns in working the press, working the machinery to make the counterfeit coin or paper money. That's what the apostles would do with their time. All right, he continues here. Joe Smith told me that in Ohio, that's Joseph Smith, and Dr. Boynton, Lyman White, Oliver Cowdery, and Hiram Smith were all engaged with others in a bogus establishment on Licking Creek. So Licking Creek, Ohio. But that their operations were cut short by the bursting of the Kirtland Bank, which was kind of another actual kind of bogus counterfeiting operation in a way, because they had not gotten approval from the state to create their bank. So then they called it the anti-bank, and you probably know some about that story. All right, so the story continues. A man by the name of Brown came to Nauvoo and sold to Joe Smith a quantity of counterfeit $10 Yates County bills. See pictured above, Yates County Bank $1 bills. These were $10 bills. Sold to Joe a quantity of these bills for $20 per hundred. Pretty cheap. Each bill being $10, you could get $20 per hundred because they were not real. Joe and Hiram have been frequently seen with their hands full of these counterfeit bills by many persons in Nauvoo, and by them the whole country was flooded with this fake money. All right, some information by the editor of the Warsaw Signal, who believed Joseph Jackson's tales. The editor was Thomas C. Sharp, pictured above, editor of the Warsaw Signal. And Sharp said, all the facts in Joseph Jackson's pamphlet are fully credited wherever Jackson is known and can be substantiated by the testimonies of all the seceders, those who left the church, and by many persons not of the church who lived at the time in Nauvoo. So yeah, people like William and Wilson Law said that what Jackson was saying was the truth. And Sharp's just kind of reiterating that. All right, and Thomas Gregg backs up this statement by Sharp in his History of Hancock County, Illinois, 1880. These seceders, the publishers of the Nauvoo Expositor, William Law, etc., et al., these seceders gave support to Joseph H. Jackson, which is true. Joseph Smith had acknowledged to him, Jackson, that he, Smith, was a counterfeiter, that he had instigated murder, and that the Mormon Bible and golden plates were frauds. All right, so Jackson continues here in his narrative. Joe Smith and I, Jackson, had a long talk concerning William Law, in which he, Smith, avowed his determination to put Law out of the way, which means to have him killed. For Law had become dangerous to the church. This is all true. Read the Nauvoo Expositor. There's a lot of other corroborating sources and evidence for this. And that it was the will of God that Law should be removed. All right, so Jackson talks about this man named Norton who wanted to reveal some information about Joseph, namely that Joseph wanted to kill William Law. So what did Joseph Smith do about this man named Norton? Well, he called him all manner of vile names and told him that his tongue ought to be pulled out by the roots. So that's interesting that Jackson knows that, because that is part of the early Mormon temple ceremonies, is part of Masonry ceremonies where Joseph Smith stole that information and put it into the Mormon ceremonies. So Jackson gets that information right. Tongue torn out by the roots. Smith said, "Damned you, Norton, if you ever give vent to such another rumor that Joseph wanted to kill William Law without more cause, I will order you cut up and fed to the catfish." So again, that the metaphor of feeding people to the catfish. And the picture above here is tongue terror, an ancient torture device for tearing out the tongues. Yes, that tearing out the tongues was nothing new, even with Masonry or Mormonism. That's something went back into ancient torture devices. All right, so Jackson talks about Hiram Smith coming up with a different idea about how they could kill Law. Hiram Smith then suggested what he called a better plan of operation, which was to win William Law's friendship by appearing sorry and apologizing for what had happened, and then invite Law to a party where they could easily put a white powder in his tea. A little more clever way of getting rid of Law. Putting in some white powder into his tea, not sure what that is, arsenic or whatever they had at the time. And once again, this information given by Jackson is corroborated by William Law himself many years later. In an interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, 1887, and William Law gave very few interviews. I think this was one of the only ones he gave, but he completely corroborates Jackson's statement. So, Law said that once Joseph Smith knew that Joseph H. Jackson and the Laws were disloyal, Joseph Smith tried everything in his power to kill them, or at least discredit them. In an interview published in the Salt Lake Tribune, Law described various plots on his life that he barely escaped, including being poisoned at Hiram Smith's supposed reconciliation dinner. Exactly what Jackson was saying. This is an interview with William Law by William Weil, March 30, 1887, Salt Lake Tribune. All right, and this information is also corroborated by Chauncey L. Higbee on April 1st, 1844. Higbee testified that Joseph H. Jackson said that Joseph Smith of Nauvoo had tried to hire Jackson to murder William Law. So Chauncey L. Higbee also backing up the idea that Smith wanted to kill Law. This information was found in Lyndon W. Cook's book on William Law that came out in 1994. Looks like in a footnote. All right, so Jackson makes another statement here. No matter how vile Joseph Smith's conduct in private, the individual who ventures to disclose it not only runs the risk of his life, but has little hope of making the people believe his story. So nowadays, I don't run the risk of my life in revealing this information. As far as I know, the church is not killing anybody for putting out history in these days. They would in the past. But as far as having little hope of making true believing Mormons believe this story, that's still the same. You present this information to a true believing Mormon, it just seems so outlandish, so far out of the correlated history and story of Joseph Smith, the charismatic, wonderful, charming, great leader of Mormonism. This just seems so far out in left field that as far as this video goes, I have little hope of making TBMs believe this story. But a lot of Jackson's information is corroborated. And of course, pictured above, we have people with their kind of brain-washing glasses on, everybody looking up. So then Jackson, in his narrative, reveals many of the enemies of Joseph Smith, those that he wanted to be cut off or to be killed. So Jackson says, Joseph Smith said that I will prophesy in the name of God that every one of the damned vipers, and who are the vipers? The Laws, William Law and his wife, Wilson Law, etc., Dr. and C.A. Foster, Higby, Kilbourne, Fleek, Sharp, the editor of the Warsaw Signal, Colonel Williams, H.T. Wilson, the sheriff that Jackson was kind of colluding with, and an A. Simpson. Those were all the enemies. And Joseph Smith said they were damn vipers, and they shall be cut off, or in other words, killed. And then, of course, Joseph H. Jackson became one of those enemies as well. Smith also called them a pack of persecuting, damned rascals. So, what did that prophecy become fulfilled? I don't think he killed all those people, so it was a false prophecy. Another false prophecy by Joseph Smith that Satan controls the waters. And you can read this if you want here, D&C 61. So after a year or so, Joseph Jackson kind of had a falling away with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith realized that he was going to be one of his enemies. Joseph Jackson joined the Laws and the other people who put out the Nauvoo Expositor, and were basically trying to bring Joseph Smith to justice. They revealed his polygamy. They revealed his counterfeiting, his treasonous activities with the Council of 50, etc. So now Jackson says in his letter to the editor that I know that my life is sought by Joe Smith. So he became an enemy, and he knew that Joseph Smith was trying to kill Jackson. Also, Joseph went after William Law. Shortly after the last mentioned attempt on my life, that's Jackson, I left the holy city Nauvoo. So he knew when it was time to get out of Dodge. Shortly after the last mentioned attempt on my life, he's hearing rumors. Time to get out of Dodge. So we know a little bit about what happened after he left Nauvoo. Jackson enlisted to fight in the Mexican War and died in Veracruz in 1847. So only a few years later, Jackson was killed in the Mexican War. This is a statement in the Iowa Statesman, June 25, 1847. And Joseph Johnston has done some more work on this. I saw a post on a message board on Ancestry.com. Johnson trying to get more information on Jackson, and there's really just not that much out there about him. So I don't know how he can finish that biography on Jackson, because I did some pretty thorough searching, and there just isn't much on him. But according to Johnston, Jackson died in 1847, either from being wounded in the Battle of Monterrey in the Mexican War, or from yellow fever. So Jackson didn't make it too long after he had left Nauvoo. I guess this picture has the yellow eye, which is a symptom of yellow fever. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. It turned out to be about an hour long. I didn't think it would be this long, but I just felt like I had to include what I had to include. So hopefully people can get through this, get through the whole hour. But that's going to do it for this video. You can make up your own mind. There's not a ton of evidence for these claims, but there is some, and there is some corroborating evidence, and Jackson's claims seem to match up pretty good with the other history that we know of Nauvoo, and of other statements by the Laws, etc. So that's going to do it for this video. I encourage everybody to go and read a narrative of the adventures and experience of Joseph H. Jackson. If this is true, then Joseph Smith and his family were members of a crime syndicate, a crime family, which sure is different than the correlated history that we all hear. So I thank you for watching the Joseph H. Jackson Exposes Joseph Smith video.